welcome to Infrastructure Matters by IPWA, the podcast dedicated to exploring the dynamic world of infrastructure, asset management and public works. I'm your host, David Jenkins, Chief Executive, and in today's episode we bring you an enlightening discussion from the Melbourne Public Works Conference 2024. We're thrilled to have Werner de Wolf, the CEO of Schréder, an expert in smart lighting and street controls, as our guest. Werner will be sharing his insights on the transformative potential of smart lighting, the importance of citizen-centered solutions, and the future of sustainable cities. So grab a coffee, sit back, and let's illuminate the future of urban infrastructure together. So welcome to Infrastructure Matters, and I'm delighted that we've got Werner de Wolf today, who's going to speak for us all things smart lighting, street controls. Werner's joined us today at the International Public Works Conference in 2024, and he's flown all the way from Belgium, and he's here having a chat with us, and I'm very, very excited about it. Just checking timeframes and watches, it's interesting that Werner is now operating at 1 o'clock in the morning, but he's here, he's bright, he's bushy-tailed, and I'm really excited about asking him some questions, all things to do with the world of smart cities and how that's changing. So let's start off first of all. So in the presentation that you gave today, I was really curious that you talked about various different areas within smart cities: smart waste management, traffic mobility, obviously smart control, street lighting. And it requires an integrated solution to take these things forward. Yet typically organizations and local government operates in silos. How do you see that playing out, and what are some of the comments you would make around how we take this forward so that we are working on an integrated solution with the outcome being smarter, more sustainable cities?
Well, I would say, David, thank you for having me here, and it's good to see it at 1 o'clock in the morning for me. But I would say the first thing that comes to my mind is always keep the citizen at the center. I see too often projects where people start from a technology perspective, looking for an application for great technology. I think that's the wrong sequence. I think we should revert it and indeed look at what are the needs for the citizens in a city, in a council, and what technical solutions can we find to provide answers to those needs. I think that's number one, I think. Number two is making sure that all ecosystem partners are part of the setup from the start. I really believe very strongly of not just doing this in a silo, but right from the start, bring all the people together from different instances. The council can be water utilities or it can be traffic utilities, depending on the setup. It's very often also making sure we connect between different councils, because they're adjacent. Doesn't make too much sense to do traffic management in one council if the next council doesn't have anything. So really making sure you cross borders right from the start to build use cases centered around the citizen, and then from there go to technology, not the other way around.
And that takes leadership, and that takes leadership from certain parts of the whole ecosystem. Have you seen? Because you've got the purview of multiple different of countries that you work and operate in. Have you seen particular examples in the world where this is done very, very well?
Well, I've seen some great examples, and we also sometimes try to be part of that, where indeed you gamify a little bit that initial discussion, where you basically bring people together from different backgrounds and different functions in a city and the surrounding ecosystem to jointly think about what are unmet needs of citizens and what would be potential use cases. So that early engagement, I think, is a very rich discussion that can lead to building consensus on what priorities are, because very often you have to make choices. You can't do it all. It's impossible. You're going to have to make choices about, hey, this is our primary use case. Let's focus on that one. Let's bring the people together. The other thing I believe is make sure that between councils and other ecosystem partners, experiences are shared. So I'm a very strong believer in user groups, where formal or informally you create groups of people that have common interests and that speak to each other, eventually even across borders. Yep. There is a lot of richness in, I think, what everybody's learning in this early phase of the market, to indeed learn from each other and enrich the use cases based on that. That's, I think, a very, very important part. And the last thing I would say is don't hold back to try things out.
Yeah.
So I think many of these applications do not require massive investments to start, which is also the danger, because the danger is you get carried away in lots of technical trials. So that I would not do. But making sure indeed that you say, hey, this is a use case that would add value to us. I always say, think big, start small, and fail or scale fast. And I also believe this applies here.
Yeah.
Have the big ambition, what you want to do, but try it out on a small scale. And then either it works and you scale it up, or it fails, then you learn from it and you try something else afterwards.
And I think you've sort of part answered this next question, because you talk about making choices, start quickly, fail fast, move on to the next thing. Because it was interesting, we had a presenter yesterday that talked about the changing demographics, where people are going to be living, the changing mobility, how people are using transport, electrification of transport, how that's going to impact roading infrastructure, how generations now working from home, how that's impacted cities. Because when we think about smart cities, we're going to have to be making some choices now, but things are changing so rapidly as well. But we're going to, I guess we're going to have to make some long-term bets on some of these things. So as that relates to sort of smart cities and smart infrastructure, how does that all play out? Because if you're making decisions now and things are going to change rapidly, does that come back to your whole, you've got to make some choices and you've got to run with them or fail fast? Is there anything else that you sort of...
If I look at what we see playing out, is I think today, and that's different from 5 years ago, but there is large consensus in our view on the need for smart lighting. And so the steps, which I call the first step from, let's say, individual lighting points to connected and smart lighting with the benefits of asset management and dynamic lighting, all those things. There's a clear use case there with an interesting financial payback. And what we see happening today is that's going to mass adoption in the next few years.
Yeah.
I mentioned in the pitch also, where a few years ago this was 5% of our luminaires sold, today we're at 25%. I think 3 years from now it's going to be more than 50%. That sets a nice foundation, because by doing that, you have the benefit of having a base foundation in your luminaire plant that you can build on. You also, by doing that, you're going to bring in some digital competences in your council, in your organization. So I think it's a great foundation to start from.
Yep.
The next step is then for me the smart city step. That's where we are currently in the exploration phase. Let's face it, many people around the world, many council cities are trying things out. We're learning from each other. I don't know where it's going to end.
Yep.
The only thing I can say is, if I go back to my telecoms background and if I see the massive advantage of having all those light poles, and I would like to call them differently, let's call them digital columns.
Yeah.
They are such a vast, massive asset we can use to do all types of value activities in cities. I really believe that great things will come out of that. But it's testing and trialing and learning from each other.
Yeah. And this sort of leads me on to the next question. So technology is changing rapidly. The world's changing, technology in general. This is not just smart cities. How do we keep pace with that and educate the end users, the implementers? How do we keep track of that? Because, there's a component there around understanding new technologies, what they can do, implement them, and the use of. How do we keep up with that? How do we keep people and the resource of the human side, the human element that's working with the technology?
It's an important question, because we face a situation that in many councils around the world, public lighting was about electrical stuff in the past, and that still is there.
Yeah.
But it's moving into, let's say, a more IT digital environment. So I think there is training required. I do not believe that this is impossible. Just a matter of, I think, being open to that. And I think organizations like yours can play a key role in accompanying councils to let's say, educate on the digital part. The second thing I believe is making sure that we bring in some young talent when possible that comes with a digital background. And we see great examples around the world of cities becoming also very attractive employers.
Yeah.
That's something different from 10 years ago, where we see some people that say, look, I want to do something for good. I have a technical background, and rather than going in a private company, I'm going to work for a council because I can do something good for the people living in the city. So bring in some young digital talent and mix them together. Number 2 and 3, I think, is making sure that don't do it all on yourself. Make sure you're part of some ecosystems with, let's say, fellow councils, other ecosystem partners, to learn from each other and to try and learn. So don't be shy. It's not the end of the world neither. Try it out, learn from that, build on that, and move further.
How do you see this all playing out over the next 10 to 15 years? So if we were to sit down here now and to talk about where smart cities are at, what do you think is going to happen between now and then?
Well, as mentioned before, I think step one will be the move to smart lighting, and that's happening as we speak. And in our view, my view, 5 years from now, this will be not a point of discussion anymore. This will be the default luminaire, will be a connected luminaire.
Yep.
And that's, I think, step one. Step two is a more difficult one. I'm not sure what will be the winning applications. We spoke at a conference about what we see today a bit as the top 5, which is traffic management, parking management, waste management, and then environmental monitoring as some key ones. That might evolve depending on use cases and technology. But I'm very confident that the richness of the managed asset, which digital columns or light poles are, will really make sure this will become a winning topic.
When you talked about sustainability right at the start of your presentation, and you said it was one of your key factors. And when we talk about, or when people talk about sustainability, that could be financial sustainability, that can be environmental sustainability. It's a broad term. How, just for the audience, just explain how sustainability in all those different terms links and plays with smart cities. How do the two work together?
Yeah. Well, I think there's lots of touch points. The first one is, if you look at the way we look at sustainability, is we always look at planet, community, and people. If you look at the planet part, there is 2 key topics. It's the global warming, the carbon footprint. For many cities, smart lighting represents their biggest electricity consumer. So by doing smart lighting in the right way, we can shave off versus lit lighting another 20-30% of consumption. That's number one. And linked to that, on biodiversity, I think the best light is the light that's, I would say, not there, or better, the light that is indeed there where it's needed, and only then. So I think we see more and more projects in that area, which are more driven by biodiversity, to make sure that only the right light is given when and where it's required.
Yeah.
And again, that requires, besides great luminaires, great photometries, it also requires, let's say, sensors and ways to manage that indeed goes in that direction. But also the people and the community part, I think, is important. It's about making sure people can live in a comfortable way. Waste management is a good example, because waste management people first think about emptying bins which are full, fine, and efficiency.
Yeah.
What we see is the much bigger topic behind it is avoiding that people start littering about a build that is thin. And littering means that you're going to attract more litter, and more litter attracts typically crime, and crime leads to unsafety. So by making sure that our city remains clean and litter-free, it will provide more comfort to citizens, it will provide more safety and more security. So those things are interrelated, and I think indeed you're going to see more and more applications in that people pillar of sustainability to make sure that security and comfort are really achieved by these future solutions.
And let's go on that sort of future solutions and where it's playing out. As the global CEO, how are you positioning Schréder to make sure that you're maximizing these opportunities?
Well, we don't know the future. We believe very strong in this, but we also don't know how it will all play out. So how do you deal with that? It's first of all by making sure that we remain open. So we are really convinced that this is a winning direction for us, but at the same time, we don't know exactly where it's going. So how do you cope with that? Well, by remaining open. In one way, by working with different partners around the world and making sure that we don't going to do everything on our own, but have an open ecosystem of people that will together bring the best solution other than we on our own, number one. But also from a system perspective, making sure that our systems, our platforms are open in the different directions so that we can easily integrate with solutions from third parties and work together to provide the best solution. By being scalable and modular, which I think is a second dimension, these things often start very small but can get very, very, very big. So making sure indeed that scalability and modular dimension is there to evolve with our customers to where they want to go in the end. And lastly, but not to be underestimated, cybersecurity is getting a big topic. Making also sure that from a cybersecurity we have the highest standards out there to make sure that our customers are not being damaged by people with some bad intentions there.
Yeah. And so how, I mean, in terms of cybersecurity, you'd have seen that elevated substantially over the last sort of 5 to 10 years.
I would even say, especially in Europe, with the war going on, we clearly see that cities are under attack. So there has been various instances of cities because they are considered, on one hand, on average in Europe, as probably a little bit less protected than companies, because companies have been attacked much more before. But secondly, the impact from a social perspective is much bigger if you hack a city or a council than if you hack a company. And we see clearly more attacks happening, specifically focused on public institutions. So indeed, making sure that we can cope with that is for me an important topic.
How's just changing topic slightly? So many of the audience will know this, but not all. You acquired Sylvania here in Australia. What's Schréder's plans now with Sylvania?
First of all, we are extremely happy with the acquisition which we did in 2020 at the start of COVID. We were a bit worried when it happened because the lockdown just started the day before the acquisition closed. But we're very happy. The business is doing very well. I would say looking forward, we want to keep strengthening our leading position in what we do well today, which is the road luminaires, the sports luminaires, and the tunnel luminaires. That's number one. Number two, we want to make sure we become a leading player in the smart dimension, and we're on the right track. A lot of projects like the Ausgate one are on the table, so that's for us a second part of growth. We're going to expand in some new segments, so we believe that solar is a very interesting segment for us globally, but also in Australia, for a number of reasons, but sustainability is one of them, and there is a nice link with smart solutions also. But we also look, for example, in more decorative lighting, which can bring more comfort to cities, where we are very strong in other parts of the world, but a bit less in Australia historically. And the transport segment is something we are looking into, as we believe that with those sustainability trends, the need for public transport will only grow. And we believe we can also play a role in there to make global transport more attractive and easier with the right lighting solutions. And the last thing I would say is with our own development center here in Australia, we will be making sure that some of the Australian developed technologies will move to the rest of the world. So I think it's not just bringing stuff from the rest of the world to Australia, it's also taking our learnings in Australia and feeding them in the rest of the world. We have a great example now of an airport which is done in the Middle East by us, which was fully developed here in Australia. But I think we're going to see more examples of that coming in the coming years.
That's interesting. So you're actually developing products here that you're looking then to export elsewhere. That's right. Okay, excellent. And I've actually been around your factory here in Australia. It's fascinating. Okay, let's change a little bit because I think the audience would be really keen to learn a little bit more about Werner. So in terms of your background, and you said that on stage today, you come from a telcos background, and then you're now working in a this capacity here with Schréder. Talk us through, how did you make, because I understand that they're related, but how did you sort of make the change? What the opportunity came up at Schréder? What why that? And just a little bit about how I guess your career has progressed and the decisions that you've made and why you've made them.
My basic education, I'm a software engineer. So I was teaching AI back in 1987.
Wow, okay.
It's a long time ago. I spent a few years in the IT world, and then there was a crisis in IT that existed in those years, and I moved into a company called Raychem, which was material science, and they moved into fiber optic networks deployment. So I spent a long time of my career in building up the business of physical layer fiber optic networking. And we deployed that all over the world, also in Australia. So Telstra was a big customer of us in those years. And we learned there basically the importance of dealing with infrastructure, because it was this infrastructure layer, and how you deal with different specifications, which is not too different from the lighting business. Also there you have historical specifications which are different by country, sometimes even by council. It's although a luminaire looks like a luminaire, they are pretty different around the world. So we had the same in our fiber optic business, and we learned on how you set something up like that. So how you learn about platform development, mass customization techniques. And also there, and that's a nice parallel, and that's where my software background was interesting. So I started there, moved out of software, but came back into software. Also in that networking part, we saw the benefit of combining passive infrastructure, which in that case were fiber optic, splice, trays, and all these things, with, let's say, digital assets, both for asset management, but in that case it was about, for example, switching fibers to each other and those things. So we started also in that business combining our passive products from before with an active digital layer that came on top. And just for the anecdote, back in 2001, I think it was, we had a fun project I was at the Connectivity at the time, where we saw at that point of time, for the first time, the link between public lighting and telecoms. And we developed, I think it was probably the first smart pole of the world in 2001. It was a cooperation between Alcatel at the time, KPN, the Dutch, Telstra, and ourselves. Schréder, by accident, appeared to be the lighting provider, to make like 17 intelligent light poles that were deployed in the Netherlands. I still have somewhere a video where we were primetime TV for 5 minutes to explain it, but we were probably 50 years too early. So we canned the project, but it was the first time where I saw indeed this combination coming through.
Yeah.
And the second thing that we saw coming at the end of my telecoms career, the 5G wave was coming, and that's where we learned the importance of power, building permit, and backhaul. And people, when they think about 5G, for sure in those years, they were all thinking on the technical, the radio planning, all those complex things. The biggest issue to deploy a 5G network is in city canyons, is how do you find, in an easy way, the spots to install the small cells on. Yeah. And again, there, the parallel came with light poles. Yeah, so we were actively looking at light poles to put them on in those years. I'm speaking about 7-8 years ago. So we sold our business to another company, and that was very American-centric, and I didn't want to move to the US at that point of time, so I decided to quit after the integration. And then, a bit by accident, I spent some time on advising some technology scale-ups around Europe, mainly at the time. And that brought me in touch with some of the Schréder people who were also at that point of time exploring their smart city or smart lighting things at the end. And by speaking to them, I felt really that there was quite some similarities between what I learned before in that global telecom business, which is also very much specification-driven, a lot of variety around the world, infrastructure-related, combination of passive and active stuff, mass customization. And I said, oh, this looks like a very interesting opportunity, because this was exactly the time that they realized that we would move from LED non-connected luminaires into smart luminaires in smart city. Yep. And that whole journey was for me very intriguing. And I really am very glad that I made that move. It has been a very nice ride. I learned a lot. I hope the organization could learn a little bit from me also. But it has been a fun ride indeed to learn about lighting and how lighting can enable other things into smart lighting in smart cities.
So your career it's not necessarily been it's taking opportunities as they've come, and sort of as things have progressed, it's beginning to identify those opportunities and take them, essentially. Yeah. Would that be fair?
Yeah, and I'm a person that is very keen on either starting up new stuff or growing stuff or changing stuff. I'm less good in maintaining something that's stable. That's not really what I like to do. Yep. As somebody who loves innovation, new stuff, and likes to take on some new challenges.
Which is perfect, because that leads me to my next question. So, I mean, you span in Schréder, multinational, multiple countries. You're the global CEO. I guess I'm really keen to understand, a person in your position, how do you set the vision and then implement that vision when you're dealing with multiple different countries' cultures? How do you essentially coordinate the troops to get everyone going in one direction?
I would say it's keeping things simple. Number one.
Yes.
So what we do is every 2-3 years, I would say, we will update our 5-year strategy. But that's one page.
Yes.
That's a simple page that lays out our values, our foundational projects, which run over 5-6 years, and our growth pillars.
Yep.
And we agree on them with the executive team, with our board and shareholder. And everything is based around those. So we basically, everybody in the company, all 2,600 employees, can speak about that single page. It doesn't change very often. So that gives us, let's say, where we are going. And now what we do is every year we define our 3 vitally important goals.
Yep.
And that's very simple. These are the 3 most important things we want to move the needle on the next 12 months. We measure that progress every single month. And every quarter I will speak to all our employees about where are we on those topics. And all the objectives of the entire are cascaded to to those three most important topics. So this is like the short-term execution of the strategy.
Yeah.
And the last dimension to it, I think, is very simple. We are a global company, but we want to respect local differences.
Yeah.
And it's about making sure we have very strong, empowered local teams with enough autonomy, strong people that understand the local specificities, that understand the local customers, and we combine that local strength with global reach.
Yes.
Yeah? So we back that up. We say global know-how, sharing know-how, global innovation, global supply chain, all those things. And if you keep it that way, and if you find the right balance, and that sounds easier than it is, that's probably where the complexity is. It's the big debate on what you do centrally and locally. But if you manage to have the right balance there, then that's a great combination.
And that's hard, isn't it? Because you talk about
That's probably the hardest part.
Yes. Finding the balance, particularly when you're dealing with shareholders. There's obviously the component around, financial objectives of the organization. Things have got to be met. KPIs have got to be met, but you've got to give that autonomy, as you say, but also you've got to keep it in check. And I guess that's always a constant play, isn't it?
It's a constant play. We have the luxury, I think, of being a privately owned business, family-owned business still, which means that we have the benefit of being a bit more long-term oriented than a listed company. I've been in listed companies for a large part of my life. I know the difference. So I think we have the luxury to indeed say, look, we set a strategy for the next 4 or 5 years and we stick to it. And we don't gonna change because there is a short-term event happening in the economy. So number one. But it's also about making sure we have the right people and we give them, we empower them. So it's giving trust to people, don't micromanage the entire thing, and empower both the local teams and the global teams, make sure they work well together.
Final question, because we do have quite a lot of younger audience who are young engineers, aspirational engineers, local government, different areas. If you were to say to someone who's thinking, you know what, this really interests me, the whole street lighting, smart control, smart cities, this is a space I really want to get into, what advice would you give them?
Say just do it.
Just do it.
I really believe, and indeed we have a little bit, public lighting is still in some parts of the world considered like an older technology, electrical engineers, an older population. I really believe that when you look at both smart lighting and smart cities, it's really exciting. The impact we can have on society. So for people that want to do something that makes the world a little bit better, there's great things we can achieve. And I think it's a great setup for young digital natives to participate in that, whether it's at a council or whether it's at a provider like ourselves or other ecosystem partners. I think it's an area where technology and, let's say, in making the world a little bit better are coming together, which I think is a very exciting opportunity for young people. I would welcome them a lot. We need them.
That's a perfect way to end. Werner, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to answer the questions, go through things, and it's obvious that your passion shines through for this area. So sincere thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
And that brings us to the end of another illuminating episode of Infrastructure Matters by IPWA. A heartfelt thank you to Werner de Wolf for sharing his expertise on smart lighting and sustainable urban solutions. Today's conversation has shed light on the critical role of technology in shaping smarter and more sustainable cities. To our listeners, thank you for joining us as always. We hope today's discussion has broadened your perspective into the future of infrastructure and public works. Stay tuned for more episodes where we delve into the innovations and challenges in this vital area. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more engaging conversations. And I'm David Jenkins signing off and reminding you that in the realm of infrastructure, every detail matters.